It was a day no Elvis Presley fan will ever forget.
I remember the exact second. It's like Kennedy getting shot. You know, I remember exactly where I was.
August 16th, 1977, the day the music died.
I think Elvis was never meant to live very long.
People all say, did you expect him to pass away? You knew he was not doing well. I said, yeah, but we always were thinking that one day he would wake up and say, what am I doing to myself?
There was once ever when I said, what do you think your worst flaw is as a human being? And he said, well, I'll probably only admit this once, but I'm self-destructive.
He was young, he was strong, and he knew how to stay healthy.
We didn't have alcohol in the house in the early 60s. He didn't care for no beer cans or booze.
He wasn't into, you know, like recreational drugs for any reason.
In those early Hollywood days, when Elvis Presley said no booze and no drugs, he meant just that. But somewhere along the line, he started drawing an important distinction.
Elvis just had in his mind that it was prescription medicine, got it from a doctor, so it's okay to take it.
And he said, well, they're prescription drugs. And the thing that I would like to share with other people is that Elvis had this innocent country boy kind of attitude. A doctor was someone he looked up to. If a doctor prescribed some sort of sedative, to him that was okay.
Originally, when he'd come out to do a movie, he would take diet pills because he was worried about his weight and wanted to be thin for the movies, because he'd eat a lot of hamburgers and stuff when he was back in Memphis.
Did he have a drug problem? Yes, but it was necessary. Elvis had a twisted colon, which I understand is very, very painful. And he had to take a heavy narcotic for that. He had glaucoma, which they had under control, but he had to take narcotics for that. I mean, he had to take it or he'd gone blind, but they had it under control.
If you walked a mile in his shoes, you would understand what he was going through. Traveling, doing shows, one-nighters, couldn't get to sleep. You're all wired up coming off stage, so you got to take sleeping pills. Then you got to get up the next day to travel 1,000 miles, and so you take some uppers.
In public, questions about Elvis's energy level were easily deflected.
I take vitamin E. I was only kidding. I don't know. I just embarrassed myself, man. I don't know, dear. I enjoy the business. I like what I'm doing.
But I don't think that Elvis ever was involved in anything that was against the law. Any drugs such as heroin or crack or any cocaine. Maybe he was, but I would have difficulty believing that. I do know that he had trouble with his weight. I do know that he had trouble sometimes sleeping. And I think that he did get hooked on amphetamines and then sleeping pills.
So it would be like one diet pill and one sleeping pill, and then his immunity built up to that. And so then it would be 2 diet pills and 2 sleeping pills. And it was just like a vicious cycle. And at one point, I flushed all those things down the toilet, and he laughed because, of course, he could, get plenty more.
The MGM years had an impact on Elvis Presley. I mean, this is the studio that was famous for shoving diet pills at a teenage Judy Garland. There's no question about it. The studio at the time had a legacy for sending stars to Dr. Feelgoods.
No one can say for sure when Elvis started abusing the drugs that would eventually lead to his death, but most friends and associates point to March 1972 when Priscilla announced to Elvis that she was leaving him. Whatever pills he may have taken before, he started taking more of them, and they, in turn, took more of a toll on him.
Elvis' personality changed. You know, he was not the happy-go-lucky, nice individual. Sometimes his moods would swing. He could be crabby at 1 minute and then fine the next.
When Elvis would get angry, there's no one in the world I've ever seen that could get so angry that could just put a dark cloud over the whole situation where it's almost smothering you. And he's not even saying anything. He's just in a bad mood and he's upset. And he could dampen the whole thing. And by the same token, when he comes out and that's not there, and hey guys, bang, the light, everything just pops wide open and everything's just great.
The amazing thing about Elvis was that, you know, then he would just clean his act up. He would just stop taking anything for long periods of time. And he was great, in good mood, had a great time. And then maybe something bothered his mind, and instead of drinking, he'd take a pill.
Sometimes even Elvis's fans were witness to his anger, at concerts when talking to them between songs.
I don't pay attention to rumors. I don't pay attention to movie magazines. I don't read them because they're all junk. When I got sick here in the hotel, I got sick here that one night. I had 102 temperature. They wouldn't let me perform. From 3 different sources I heard I was strung out on heroin. Oh, by God, I'll tell you something, friend. I have never been strung out in my life, except on music. They're all across this town, strung out. So I told him earlier, and don't you get offended, ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking to somebody else. If I find or hear the individual that has said that about me, I'm going to break your goddamn neck, you son of a bitch. That is dangerous. That is damaging to myself, to my little daughter, to my father, to my friends, my doctor, to everybody, my relationship with you, my relationship with you on the stage. It is dangerous. I will pull your goddamn tongue out by the roots.
And I remember when we left and said goodbye, we walked out of the dressing room, closed the door behind us, and I looked at Sandy and she looked at me and I said, you know what, that'll be the last time we're going to see Elvis alive. And she said, what do you mean? And I didn't say anything else, and we walked back to our hotel. We got a cab, we went back to our hotel, and we had no sooner gotten into our dressing room and both of us just broke down and cried because we felt it was so sad what we had just witnessed. And 6 months later, he was dead.
I remember when I was 18 or 19, my mother and I were in West LA, and my mother said, I had a terrible dream. I dreamt that Elvis's mother came to me and said, save my son, save my son. And I think Elvis is in major trouble. And we flew to Vegas, and we tried to get in, and it's the first time ever that Elvis didn't have us backstage. And they said, he's really sick. He can't see anybody right now. And I know that that's when, you know, things were getting really bad, and I only wish that my mom could have been around him more. I wish that he could have had more loving female influences. You know, a lot of people cared about him, but a lot of people were afraid to help him.
Drug use is insidious. You start out with a little bit works, so why not more works better? And so by the time I met him, he was already at the more works better stage. And so that's what I had to deal with, you know, just him taking a lot of medications, and I, you know, would have to sometimes give him the medications or injections or whatever. He told me it was vitamin B12, and I don't think it was. Just between you and I. Don't tell anybody.
The people closest to Elvis were fiercely protective of his reputation. Initially, Joe Esposito denied Elvis's drug use.
I was just protecting my friend. I mean, I know there was a problem there. I mean, you can't take all that kind of medication. It's not going to make you feel healthy.
And Linda Thompson, Elvis's girlfriend from 1972 to 1976, never mentioned drugs to her brother Sam, even when he went to work for Elvis as a bodyguard.
Sam, my brother Sam, he came to me after a few months of having been on the road with Elvis, and I'd been with Elvis about 2 years at the time, I think, 2.5 years. And he said, "Baby sister." I said, "Yeah." And he said, "How come you never mentioned any of this? We're close, right?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "But you've never shared this with anybody. You've never told me anything about what's going on here, and that, you know, Elvis is doing these prescription drugs, and this is a real distorted way of life." And I was so protective of Elvis that I didn't even share that with my only sibling, whom I was really, really close to, and am still very close to. And he was really taken aback by that I had never even shared with him the kind of drug abuse that Elvis had succumbed to.
I would be in charge of the medicine box, and it had all of this medicine in it. And you know, sometimes we would try to fill some of the capsules with sugar and make him think he was getting a sleeping med when in fact it was a placebo. And so, you know, it was all a game. Let's pretend Elvis isn't dying, you know. We didn't really talk about how serious it was, but it was.
As rumors of his drug use became more widespread, Elvis didn't help his own cause with rambling interviews like this one from 1973.
How do you pace yourself?
Sir?
How do you pace yourself?
Physically, vocally, whatever.
So you are up when you need to be up?
I just, I exercise every day. I vocalize every day. I practice if I'm working or not. You know. So I just try to stay in shape all the time. Vocally and mentally. And
you know what I think it might be? No one ever says no to them. You know? Say no to me, we'll say no to you. Everybody gets said no to. No. Not to Jim Morrison. You didn't say no to Jim Morrison. He's the lead singer. He's the star, you know. He wants to do this, he wants to do that. You kind of go along with him, you know. He wants to drink. How do you stop him from drinking? I think the same thing happened to Elvis. No one said, "Get the bottle out of your hand." Knocked it right out of his hand. No pills, bam. As a matter of fact, boom. Now go to sleep and sit down there. You couldn't do that to Elvis Presley. You'd do that to anybody else. You know, you do that to the drummer in the band or the guitar player, but you don't do that to the lead singer. Elvis was the lead singer and the biggest thing until the Beatles. So how do you stop him?
We all talked to him one time or another. His dad, Priscilla, the guys, all the guys around, and we sat around and talked, said we got to do something about this. And there was times in there, Red and Sonny would be in the bedroom talking to Elvis, and they would talk to him about, you know, Red would say something about, you know, "Elvis, you got to start cleaning up your act." He's, "No, you know, it's that same old thing. Yeah, I'll do it. When I'm ready to do it, I'll do it." And then or he'd get mad at you and just tell you, "Get out of the room." He was very hard-headed.
In 1977, bodyguards Red West, Sonny West, and Dave Hebler made what they maintain was a final attempt to help Elvis see what drugs were doing to him. They wrote the tell-all book, Elvis, What Happened.
My cousin Red charged in to stop it one time. I think he broke the guy's toe or something going through the door and told him that he was going to break him up if he didn't quit getting the stuff to him. And Elvis heard about it, and he called Red and Joe in. They discussed it for a while, and then finally he looked at Red and said, I'll never forget it, he said, "I need him, man. I need it."
And how do you protect a man from himself?
When word of the book in progress leaked out, Elvis was devastated.
That pretty well haunted him the last year of his life. He got obsessed with it. Every night we'd sit and talk about it after the shows. You know, he was so concerned about what they're saying about me, what they're going to write about me, what are the people going to think about me, what are my fans going to say, how about Lisa Marie when she reads this, when she gets older. It bugged him. It bugged him, but instead of doing something about it, he just got worse.
The book was published on August 1st, 1977. 2 weeks later, Elvis had flowers delivered to his mother's grave, as he did every August 14th, the anniversary of her death. On the 15th, Elvis was getting ready to go on tour.
I came in that evening, and Larry Geller came in town too from L.A. I was staying at the Howard Johnson's hotel down the street. And I came to the house that evening and hung around, visited some of the people. Sam Thompson was there, and the other guys just talking and getting ready for tomorrow. And Elvis went to the dentist.
It was just a routine visit to check him over. He was preparing a tour, and he had Ginger Alden with him. And his comments to me were, Dr. Hoffman, after you check me over, if you can, please check Ginger over, because I would like to get her teeth fixed and straightened. And it was just a very, very enjoyable visit.
Elvis came back about 1:30, 2 o'clock from the dentist, and he walked through the front door, and when I heard him come up, I ran out to see him, and he walked in, he had a pair of sunglasses on. And he looked at me, and he took his sunglasses off, and he went like that. He shook his head, communicating that he didn't feel too good. He put his sunglasses on, walked upstairs. I went to the kitchen, and I just thought to myself, we're leaving tomorrow. This man is ill. He doesn't feel good. We're going to just start a tour.
And I was there when he got back, and just before he went down to play racquetball, he called me upstairs, and we were just talking about some of the songs and the upcoming tour. And I had actually been supposed to take Lisa Marie back for several days to Priscilla. And as always happened when Lisa came to visit, Elvis would just want to add a few more days, because he really loved his daughter and was looking for an opportunity to stay with her. So my role the next day was to come back over, pick Lisa up, and fly commercially back to Los Angeles.
And all of a sudden I heard someone say, Larry, it's the phone, it's Elvis, he wants you right now. I picked the phone up, and Elvis was upstairs on his phone, and he said, Larry, how you doing? I said, fine. He said, did you bring me those books from Los Angeles? I said, yeah, I've got them here. He said, well, maybe you should come upstairs. We have a lot to talk about. There's a lot I want to talk to you about. I said, yeah, but Elvis, you know, we're going to go on tour tomorrow. We'll have every night to talk. Why don't you get some rest?
I said goodnight to him and left in the wee hours of the morning. And I went home and went to bed. And as I recall, we embraced, which we often, we'd shake hands and then we'd give each other a little hug, you know, and I told him to get some rest or something like that. And then I went home and went to sleep.
I called upstairs and I said, Elvis, I'm here. Is there anything you need? Anything we should be ready for tomorrow? He said, no, everything's fine. You know, make sure you wake me up tomorrow afternoon, and if I need anything, I'll let you know. Basically, that was it. So I hung around a little bit, went back to the hotel, went to sleep.
Early in the afternoon of August 16, 1977, Ginger Alden awoke to find that 3 hours after Elvis went into the bathroom to read, he still hadn't returned. She went back to sleep.
About 12 o'clock, came back to Graceland on the 16th, and Al Strada was there packing the wardrobe cases. And that's when, about 2 o'clock, 2:10, the phone rang, the intercom. It was Ginger calling down, and one of the maids answered. And she asked if one of the boys was there, and she said, Al's here. So she gave the phone to Al. She asked Al to come upstairs. Al went upstairs, went into the bedroom, and Ginger apparently thought Elvis fainted. And as soon as Al got up there, he called me real quick on the intercom, and he said, Joe, I need your help. Elvis has collapsed. So I ran upstairs and went into the bedroom, into the bathroom, and Elvis had fallen off the toilet. He was reading a book, apparently, and he fell onto the carpeting, and I immediately turned him over, and the minute I touched him, I knew that he had been dead for a while.
His body was found on the floor in a fetal position.
So I turned him over and I pulled up his pajamas, and I could not, you know, there's always people say I try to give him mouth-to-mouth. I did not try to give him mouth. I could not give him mouth-to-mouth because his mouth was shut, closed. There was no way he could open it. And I tried to do the heart thing, which I saw in movies. I'm not a CPR expert. I tried that for a long time. I picked the phone up first of all and called the operator. Said, I need an ambulance here at 3764 Elvis Presley Boulevard. Somebody has collapsed. We need somebody here quick.
My dad came over and took me to Graceland. He was going to drop me off because we were going to have a car take us to the airport. And as I was going into Graceland, a car came speeding down. It turned out it was David Stanley. And I was just saying hi to David or something, and he said something like, have you heard the news? Elvis just died, or Elvis is dead, or something like that. And I mean, my dad and I were just startled, and I thought, well, yeah, I must have heard that wrong.
I think Al or somebody called Vernon. He was down in the office, Elvis's father, and he came upstairs, and a little concerned about Vernon because Vernon had a bad heart. He's had some heart problems the last couple of years, and he came in and he got on his knees and he was, saying, Elvis, please don't leave us. Elvis, my boy. And it was a tough scene. All kinds of things were happening. We were trying. Ginger was by the doorway, then Lisa Marie was in town. She was getting ready to go back to LA that day. She came by the door and looked into the bathroom and saw her father laying there. That was tough, sort of get her out of here. And it seemed forever before the ambulance got there. And I come to find out later it was about 20 minutes it took them to get there, and we have no idea why.
I'd come in and I was standing in the kitchen with my back to, where there's a little part that's flat there where the cabinets are. And I was standing there looking through the paper, and Patsy Gamble and Burnham came behind me. I thought they were laughing, because laughter and sorrow is a lot alike sometimes. And I turned around and looked to see what's so funny, and I saw that they were both crying. And I went straight upstairs, and Joe was already up there. And I began to do what I could.
He was supposed to start a tour for me the next day in Maine. And my telephone rang, and it was Joe Esposito on one line. I don't even know if he remembers this, but it was Joe. And he said, Jerry, I got to talk to you. And my other line rang. I said, hold on one second, Joe. And I hit the other line, and it was Rowan Aldridge from ABC News. And he said to me, Jerry, Elvis is dead. I said, what? What? He said, he just died. I said, hold on. And I got back on with Joe. I said, Joe, what's the matter? Joe said, I'm in the bathroom with Elvis. He just died. He hadn't taken him away yet. He said, I just want you to know because your phone's going to start ringing. And I said, it's already rung. Rowan Aldridge is on the phone. He was Joe was a disaster. He was a complete wreck. He lost his best friend and he couldn't believe it. I mean, he was totally bummed out.
And we all went downstairs. Charlie Hodge was with me. We took him downstairs to the ambulance, got him back in the ambulance. I jumped in the back of the ambulance. Charlie Hodge jumped in the back with me. And just as we were getting ready to pull out, Dr. Nick pulled up in front of the house, jumped out of his car, and jumped in the back of the ambulance with us. And we took off.
I was telling him to breathe for us, because Elvis used to say that the last thing to go was your hearing. So with that in mind, but in reality, rigor mortis had already set in. He'd been dead for some time, but you don't want to give up. And like I said, with the last thing, him saying that the last thing to go is your hearing, I was saying, breathe, help us breathe, and everything. And then the medics said later that they believed at the time Elvis fell, if they'd have been there with the right equipment, it was too late. He was gone.
And so I got up to the top of the hill there, and I could see a fire department ambulance sitting at the front door. Well, my first thought it was Vernon, because Vernon had had a bad heart and he'd had some problems. So I really thought at that moment that it was Vernon that David was talking about. And I went in, and Vernon was sitting in a big high-back chair in the jungle room, crying. And I just stood in the dark for a moment and stepped out, and then he saw me and he said something like, "Is that you, Sam? You know, well, you're here to get Lisa. Well, there's no need to go. My boy's dead," or something. And he just burst out and started crying, and Nicopolis was there, and it was quite a scene. It was pandemonium. And they had already taken Elvis's body by that time.
We went to the hospital, got into the emergency room. They ushered Charlie and I off into another room, and they took him into the emergency room. And Billy Smith showed up at the emergency room, and I forgot who else. I don't remember. It was starting to get very hectic.
So I went to the emergency room, and they were working on him. And when I went in, it was very evident that Elvis had been gone a long time. And I just asked him to stop. I said, "Please do not do this to him." And Dr. Nick, I said, "Dr. Nick, please don't do anything else." And so they worked for a few more minutes, and I said, "Dr. Nick, please don't do anything else." And so they stopped.
I think probably the most amazing part of that was that there were a few moments during this time period of we're trying to resuscitate him. There were a few moments where we got some heartbeat back, which, when you put things in perspective, how long he'd been dead and how you got heartbeat back, I mean, when you look back on it, it was just an amazing feat. You know, even though it wasn't sustained, there was still some EKG evidence of a heart beating.
Elvis would not have wanted to be anything other than vibrant and able to sing and to live a normal life. And had they been able to resuscitate him as long as he had been gone, it would have been bad. And God works for God. And so I was glad he had the upper hand.
Then Dr. Nick came in there and told us that he was gone.
We felt like that Elvis died of some cardiac arrhythmia problem where his heart just starts beating erratically and real fast.
That's when I called Colonel Parker in Portland, Maine, and told him what happened. And there was a lot of silence on the other side of the phone. And he just says, "We'll be there tonight." And then I called Priscilla and told her. And naturally, she was in shock. I mean, she didn't know what to do. She asked naturally, "How's Lisa?" I said, "Lisa's fine. Don't worry about her."
I was living in Los Angeles, and I think it was about 12 or 1 o'clock. The phone rang, and it was Lisa Marie. Linda, my dad's dead. My daddy died. My daddy died. He's dead." I said, "What? He's dead. He's dead." And I threw the phone in the air. It was like such a nightmarish quality. I just couldn't even accept it. So I threw the phone, and I'm standing there saying, "Oh my God, oh my God!" And I hear this little voice across the room on the receiver, and I collected myself enough to realize this little 9-year-old child has had the presence of mind to pick up the phone, dial my number long distance to let me know that the person that she knew I loved has passed on. So I somehow reached for the phone again, and I said, "Lisa, honey, are you sure?" And she said, I'm sure," and she was hysterical. She was crying. And then I just started trying to say things like, you know how much your daddy loves you and how much your daddy's always loved you and you're his little girl. And I was trying to say things to her to comfort her on some level while I was so distraught myself, and I was by myself in my apartment. And my brother took the phone from Lisa, and he said, "Linda?" I said, "Sam, is it true? Is it just, she's wrong, isn't she? He's just sick. He had a problem. They took him to the hospital." He said, "No, you better come home." And I said, "Well, give me to Lisa again." So he put Lisa back on. I said, "Honey, I'm going to come in and just feel your daddy's love, because that's always with you." And then we hung up, and then I caught a flight late in the evening and flew to Memphis right away.
I got a call from Memphis in the morning of
the day he passed away and to let me know before it was on television, just so it wouldn't be shocked and freaked out. When I went over to Linda Thompson's house, and she was getting ready to fly back to Memphis.
Phone's ringing. And I can't talk to anybody. Judy had to take the call. I couldn't talk to my brother, my sisters, my mom and dad, my friends. I couldn't talk to anybody. I was crying. I was walking around my room bawling like a 10-year-old baby. Could not control my feelings.
I get this phone call from Joe, and he said, "Shirley, Elvis is dead." And I said, "What?" He said, "I'm telling you, Elvis is dead." And I said, "Joe, don't joke around." And he started to cry.
And I got a phone call. And I think it was from Shirley, who at the time was Joe Esposito's girlfriend. I was shocked, but I wasn't shocked. And I don't know how that can be, but you know, sometimes you have premonitions about things. And I hadn't seen him or spoken to him for about 6 months. But I had kept tabs on how he was and where he was, because Shirley had become a very good girlfriend of mine, and she was going with Joe at the time.
I can remember running my nails across the wall. And the last I remember, I was behind our apartment in the alley just crying. And then after that, it was just getting everything together. And then Joe remained pretty calm and just kind of handled everything the best he could.
And I was getting calls from friends, Nancy Sinatra and Margaret, different friends, different celebrity friends that wanted to come. And, you know, I said, you know, it was tough, you know, just, I couldn't help him. It was a madhouse there. And I suggested, Nancy, you know, just don't come. It's going to be crazy here. And Aunt Margaret, I said the same thing to her. And she says, no, I'm coming.
Another celebrity who'd been trying to call was singer Tony Orlando, who, like Elvis, and like Tony's good friend, the late Freddie Prinz, also had a drug problem. Oddly, though, Tony started calling the house several hours before Elvis died.
After what happened to Freddie, after what was going on with me, I became very frightened about Elvis. And the night before he died, I started to call the house. And I started calling about 10:30. I was very concerned, and I kept calling well after midnight, and I got no answer. On the morning of the 16th, I decided to walk down the street to St. Patrick's Cathedral. Now I know Priscilla, I knew Lisa as a child, and they used to come see me at the hotel and the shows in the front row. They'd sit in the front row, you know. And I decided to go to St. Patrick's Cathedral and light a candle for Elvis and Lisa and Priscilla. I kneeled down, I lit 3 candles, I said my prayers, I hoped them for the best. I walked back, I get to the hotel room, and Elaine opens the door, and she says, "You better sit down. They found Elvis today, and he died today." And I don't know quite what it was that was making him pursue this feeling or this sense that he was in danger. But I never forget that. I never forget that I was trying to call him the night before, didn't get through, went to church, prayed for him, and that very morning, he was no longer.
Well, I lost it, and they had to sedate me. But I had enough sense as soon as the plane landed back in Burbank, and I got home, I immediately got on the phone and made a plane reservation. And it's lucky that I did, because an hour later, I couldn't have gotten one.
I was in Dallas, Texas, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, it reminds me so much of the John F. Kennedy thing. I mean, when I heard about John F. Kennedy, for some reason, it touched me in a place I haven't been touched before, except for those 2 deaths, and I don't know why.
I was in Las Vegas. I was on my way to a television station, walking in the door to do an interview to promote a show I was doing there. And they said, "Well, what do you think about Elvis?" I said, "Well, what do you mean? He's the great." I went on and on. No, he just died. He said, "What?" Moments later, I was on television. That was tough.
When I heard the news that Elvis passed away, I believe that I was I was in California, in Los Angeles. And I just remember, you know, breaking into tears and feeling so empty.
I was appearing in Wildwood, New Jersey in the summertime, in August. I had my 2 children there with me, and we were, I think, just coming in from taking them out like to the beach or something, and we were coming inside to the hotel, and I was to, you know, start getting ready for the show, and they had to get their dinner and so forth, and that's when I heard the news. And naturally, they were young, they didn't know really what had happened, but it was quite a thing.
It really didn't sink in to me personally, because I didn't even cry that much that whole time.
Joe Esposito was still shell-shocked when the ever-intrusive press peppered him with questions even as Elvis's body lay in state inside Graceland.
I did a couple of interviews, I think. I don't even remember, to tell the truth. I know I was in front of a camera answering questions from a few reporters, and a lot of it's a big blur.
Mr. Esposito, can you tell us anything about the family, how they're bearing up in this this time and in this
Right
situation?
now, they're all in a state of shock. I don't think nobody really, you can't realize it yet. I don't even realize it.
What about Mr. Presley's former wife? How is she?
She's pretty upset.
What's going to be the procedure for the funeral tomorrow?
I couldn't tell you till I sit down. We're going to go over that in a little while.
But Joe couldn't afford the luxury of sitting down. He had a funeral to arrange.
It's just like putting on a show. We had to do it the right job. Like I say, Sam and Dick Grobe, Sam Thomas and Dick Grobe, they handled all the security situation. They had all the meetings with the police department and the highway patrol because they knew it was going to become pretty hectic.
And then I guess for about the next 4 days, I probably had 30 minutes worth of sleep because we had the whole funeral to put on and the security. And I stayed at the house and was in charge of guarding his body when they brought it back from the funeral home.
I didn't get to go to the funeral. I was married, and my husband didn't want me to go because of all the hoopla.
I wouldn't even go to his funeral. I don't think I could have been any help to anybody there. Joe would have just felt pressure to put me up. I didn't want to deal with Priscilla and Linda and every other girl that thought she was the only one. You know, I didn't want to be a part of the drama, you know. I just didn't.
I was just so stunned and so grief-stricken and so at loss that I really didn't know what to expect of my own reactions, the fans' reaction, how many people would be there, family reaction, would there be a celebrity contingent, you know, nothing occurred to me. I was just kind of catatonic getting back to Memphis.
Tom Hewlett, I believe, said, "Colonel, I need to get a suit. I don't have a suit with me. We can't go to the funeral in the clothes we were on tour." And Colonel said, "Tom, these clothes were good enough for us to work for Elvis. They're good enough for us to wear at his funeral. He would understand. And if he saw me in a suit, he wouldn't recognize me." So we went to the funeral in very basic work clothes, in our work clothes. I had slacks.
Those closest to Elvis worried about his appearance as well.
When Elvis passed away, his father asked me to go to the mortuary to prepare Elvis's hair for the funeral. And I went. And Elvis had a regrowth of white hair, about ½ an inch, all over. And I wasn't prepared for it. I didn't bring my dyes. And there was a female mortician, and she had a mascara kit. Fortunately, it was black, with a little brush, and I smeared it all over, faked it, no one ever knew.
Vernon told him what kind of a casket he wanted for Elvis, and he wanted all limousines, white, all white, and there was not even that many limousines in Memphis, and they had to get limousines from Arkansas, Mississippi. They got them all to come in.
I still have this vision in my mind of all the big white limousines that we rode in, and it was so appropriate that they were white because he had such a purity of heart and celebrated life on such a level that it was so nice to not have just all black limousines and a black hearse. The white meant a lot to me.
George Hamilton, good friend of Colonel Parker's and a friend of Elvis's, he came, and it was heck trying to coordinate who's going to go in what limousine and all that. I know some people got their feelings hurt, some family members, because they weren't up in the front ones. But we did it, and it all worked out, and I'm sure Elvis was very proud of everybody that put this together for him, because it was hell.
They asked Colonel to ride in one of the limousines, in one of the front limousines with family, and Colonel said no. I have always been behind the scenes with Elvis. That's the way I want to maintain it. And he rode in a limousine, but not with the family group.
Every flower in the city was delivered to Graceland. They were come from all different parts of the state because all the florists ran out of flowers.
The body lay in state at the base of the stairs at Graceland, and the fans could come through and view his body for the last time, which I think was comforting to them, just to be able to have that kind of closure, as they say, just to be able to say one last goodbye, to see him. Maybe they'd never seen him while he lived, but they saw him in his death.
Unfortunately, those devoted fans had to make great sacrifices in order to say that one last goodbye to their hero.
The bad thing about August in Memphis is horrible. It's humid, hot, and then there was no wind blowing at all, and people were outside the gate shoving and pushing, wanted to get in. When we opened the gates up for the people to come up around and come and say their goodbyes to Elvis, people were collapsing, fainting from the heat exhaustion. Ambulance was there, the police department was there, and it was like a battle zone almost. It really was. It was really horrible. I felt bad for the people, but nothing we could do about it.
There's one lady that left her husband and 3 children and threw herself under a train on the day that Elvis died. And they had a whole list of people who actually killed themselves on the day Elvis died. What an effect that man had.
But even under such tragic circumstances, there was still humor to be found.
I sat on the landing of the stairs and watched all these people come through and pay their last respects to Elvis, and we alternately laughed hysterically and cried hysterically, and each of us would look at each other and know what Elvis would have said as someone came through, a funny little remark he might have made about what they were wearing, or some guy came in a neck brace, and we looked at each other and we said, he would have said the guy's in worse shape than he is. What's he doing here? He's in worse shape than I am.
It was pretty tough. It was pretty tough to see him laid out dead in the living room, and then when I got there, I had a meeting with his father and the colonel, and a whole bunch of people were there, and it was the day of the funeral. Anyway, I'm gonna cry because I miss him.
But not everyone who passed by Elvis's casket showed the same level of respect.
The picture of Elvis on the cover of the National Enquirer was the biggest selling issue they ever had in history. And a relative takes the picture, got paid $75,000 to sneak a camera into his room, his own relative, then sell them the picture.
Elvis's unusual appearance led to one of many urban myths that arose in the months and years following his death. The Elvis sighting.
When we saw Elvis at the time of the funeral, he just looked so different than he did, because he'd lost all that bloatness, and he lost all his abdomen because all those things were removed. And just reason some people didn't think it was Elvis, but because he didn't look like the obese Elvis that we thought of before.
Some fans are very gullible, and they'll believe that Elvis is still alive. You got these people. There's people today saying they still talk to him. Elvis Elvis died, man. Elvis died August 16th, 1977. And it just makes me mad. It really does. You know, and then I feel sorry for the fans because a lot of people are gullible and they believe it.
Once Elvis was laid to rest, it was time for those closest to him to go on with their lives. Or at least try.
The thing that struck me most was that life went on. I think when you're grieving and you're at such a personal loss and you feel such personal loss, the television news would allude to Elvis passed away today, Elvis died yesterday, the funeral was held today, and then on to something else. And I wanted to say, no, wait, you can't go on. There is nothing else. That's all that matters right now. And that's what struck me personally, that the world could go on and that life could go on without him.
Probably about 3 months later, one evening at the house, at my home, I just said, I'm not going to see him again. I'm not, you know, he's gone. And I became very depressed, and my girlfriend Shirley, thank God she was there, she helped me out tremendously. I just realized that he is not coming back. We're not going on tour anymore. We're not making movies. He's not singing anymore. And that depressed the heck out of me for a long time. Luckily, I had some friends like Jerry Weintraub and Tom Hewlett around, and Jerry told me actually at the funeral, he says, you know, when you want to go to work, just let me know. And I went to work for Jerry Weintraub about 10 months after Elvis passed away. And it's tough.
I know he's gone, but to me, he's still here. I mean, he's all over the media. I mean, I think about him every day. I think all of us, as I say, I miss him terribly, but he's with me all the time, you know.
But I think Elvis was never meant to live very long. Who would want to see him old? You know, can you imagine him old? I can't.
Elvis lived a long time compared to Jim Morrison, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, Brian Jones, and Kurt Cobain, who all died at 27. We had Elvis for a long time, you know. We were lucky to have him that long. There's something about genius that carries, that kind of genius that carries the seeds of its own destruction.
Elvis had his faults. You know, none of us, however, he did tell me one time, Miss Cock, I don't know but two people in this world that are perfect. One's you and the other one's me. And he's gone, and I have this awesome responsibility to myself now. But he was a very kind and warm and loving man.
His fire that burned within him came from his spiritual strength and his faith, and the passion that he let out in his singing, in the gospel-like singing that he did, was passion coming straight from the strong soul that he is today, wherever he is.
He didn't have a life. He was a professional Elvis Presley, you know. And there's a sadness to that. At the same time, I mean, he was what he was.
A lot of guys have come and gone and this and that, but he's Elvis Presley. And the people that were raised in that era couldn't let go of it, even if they wanted to, you know. I mean, he's an enormous part of their life. He's a part of my life, so that's never going to go. And then different generations on down hear about him, and you know, he was a phenomenon. He pretty much started rock and roll.
Now, he was unique, and I think the charisma that he had with his fans was something else. It's too bad he didn't realize how much he was loved.
I, for one, am sorry that I didn't reach out more, because I think at the end of where his life ended was when we should have been there more. And I've often regretted that. But as what happens with a very big star, you have a tendency to think that they're okay, they're surrounded, which he was most of the time. But, you know, instinctively we all feel we should have been there a little bit more for him.
He said it to Kathy Westmoreland several months before he died. He said to her, "Kathy, I wonder when I die if I'll ever be remembered." And now, after all is said and done, the irony is this. You can take all the some of the great stars in the history of the 20th century, going back to the first great sex symbol, Rudolph Valentino, to Clark Gable, to James Dean, Marilyn Monroe, Frank Sinatra, John Lennon. Put them all together. More people go visit Elvis than all of them combined each year. And each year it gets more so. Elvis is remembered in a way that transcends show business, because he touched the hearts and souls of people all over the world in a way that no other star ever did.